Yeah, I love this kind of content. It is one of those areas where I've not really done much deep exploration myself and really understand how all of it fits together. Like, I understand the general high level concepts, right? Like, obviously, when you get into the more programmy side of it, like decompilation, things like that, like, that stuff's all makes a lot of sense. But when it comes to actually taking a bit of malware and breaking it down and analyzing it, this is something I would have no idea how to do, and more importantly, no idea how to actually do safely. And I feel like a lot of people shouldn't do it, but might benefit from actually knowing how you go about doing so.
Okay. Yeah. So the first thing is, and it inevitably is going to vary depending on what you're dealing with, because sometimes you have like one thing I've covered a few times that's been quite popular is open source projects that have various ways of sneaking the code in there, either through obfuscation or just putting it off screen so you don't see it. So for that, a lot of it is just looking at the code and being like, okay, this doesn't look. So actually, before we get into that, I should just explain. There's really within the field of malware analysis, there's two main categories. There is static analysis, which is analysis of the files, whether that's using a disassembler, which is a tool that can sort of decompile the code, or a decompiler if it's like a Java or C Sharp or something. And then there is dynamic analysis, which is kind of more exciting, which is when you actually run the malware and either you hook a debugger to it and you try and, or you can just let it run and use tools like a process monitor and MITM proxy to see the internet activity. And you can see, okay, what is this actually doing? You can analyze. So that's the very basic. So in terms of doing that, well, for the dynamic stuff, what I would usually do, and that's definitely how I started out, is you set up a VM and you can use. I've often used VMware Workstation because it just works very well. It's easy to set up, and sometimes I use KVM, kernel virtual machine. So you set up a VM and you install whatever operating system you're wanting to test on. And then what I will usually do is I'll set up the network. I'll install WireGuard in the VM. And then I can set up a WireGuard server with MITM proxy. And then all the network traffic is getting routed to the host so I can see what it's doing. That's kind of that's the easiest key. The other tools I like are Process Explorer and Process Monitor from sysinternals. And then we add sometimes just going into the actual file, which I usually, if it's a exe or a elf or a Mac file, I'll just use Binary Ninja and I can open it up and get the assembly and try and go through that.
So, obviously, different malware is going to operate in very different ways, but are there general things you're looking for to at least initially spot something weird happening?
Yeah, definitely. A big part of it, especially, is circumstances. Like a lot of malware that targets users will promise something that is not possible. Like to give you some simple examples.
Download more
Okay, let's.
RAM.
Yeah, that's extreme.
Obviously, that's
But
like
let's.
everyone knows that one's a joke, but like I guess if you want to do a game example, like a Fortnite skin swapper or Fortnite
Yeah,
V-Bucks, infinite
there
V-Bucks.
is. Okay, a V-Bucks definitely. There is actually a way of doing skin swapping on the client side, but it's
Actually, that's
utterly
fair.
infested. No, another one would be like, for example, Final Cut Pro for Windows, which we know will never ever
Right, right.
exist. So that's one red flag is when it's an implausible conclusion. The other one is just oftentimes the instructions will be kind of blatant. They'll say something like disable your antivirus and run as administrator. That should
Right.
oh okay okay let's do that. Yeah, and then other things to watch out for, especially like always think about, like for example, with cracks and cheats to a lesser extent. Like for example, if you're on YouTube looking for something and you see recently uploaded video, well, think would this be up here? Like, would this stay up for any amount of time, or would it be copyright claimed? It wouldn't, because YouTube will take those kind of videos down. So it's another red flag. Like I'd say the biggest thing you got to rely on when you're looking for something unofficial is just is this like an official looking? Does this look like where it should be? Can you trust the uploader? Yeah.
Right. And I did notice in one of you, it's probably happened in a bunch of videos, but one of the ones I was watching, you were looking for, I think it was a mod menu for something, and you'll run across a mix of actual paid mod menus and then
Yeah.
people pretending to be the paid mod menus,
Yes. That's
which
exactly what happens.
I'm sure also happens very similar in looking for cracks for games as well, where it's like, this is actually someone who's linking you to the file, and here's another person who's like, well, they're not going to know any different anyway, so
There you go.
enjoy.
Just one thing I thought I would add, actually, thinking of files, is okay. Another big red flag is there are specific file sizes to watch out for.
Mhm.
Slightly above 700 megabytes, so you can't upload it to VirusTotal, is one.
Mhm.
They like to do that. Bonus points if when you put it in a zip, it's much smaller. That's because they just added a bunch of zeros. The
Mhm.
other one I sometimes see is it's just way too small. Like it'll say Cyberpunk 2077 crack, and it's 10 megabytes.
Right.
It's not going to be Cyberpunk.
Mhm. Yeah, it kind of reminds me of well, it's directly the same thing. When back in the days of things like LimeWire, you download a song and it's like,
Yeah.
this is Linkin Park New Divide. It is 10 kilobytes. It's like, is it now?
No virus.
No.
Better say
I definitely
no.
made that mistake a couple of times myself when I was a kid. That family computer was not in the best of states back then. Yeah, so basically, well, that's at least the static side, right? So that's something you can like look
Yeah.
out for but like
Instantly.
before it's run. But once you actually run it, what are you looking for? Like when doing that dynamic analysis.
Okay. Well, in terms of like, I'll give two answers. First of all, just as a user without any tools, what is a very bad sign?
Mhm.
Okay, the worst sign is you run a file that says it's something, and either nothing happens,
Mhm.
or the absolute worst is it just opens up a hidden like terminal window for a few seconds.
Right.
That's a massive red flag. But otherwise, I look and see, okay, what is it doing? I can see the network. If it's a stealer, right, it's gonna take everything in your Chrome cookies, and that's gonna be sent over. That's concerning. Uh, Within that, like, what processes does it open? Does it spawn a bunch of weird looking processes? Or on Windows, one to look out for is regasm.exe. There's a way that's a Microsoft process,
Mhm.
but there's a way of dumping, or I think the proper word is reflecting
Mhm.
the actual code into it, so that so that you don't see what's going on. So that's that. If I see that spawning, that's a massive red flag.
Mhm. So, well, I guess the other like really obvious red flag that it should be so obvious you don't even need to mention it is if Windows Defender starts screaming at you the second you run it, maybe think twice about going any further.
The only trouble with that
Mhm.
is so okay. First of all, antivirus is to some degree a game of quid pro quo.
Mhm.
If you're and especially things like game cheats and cracks will be detected as such.
Right.
But the worst thing is, oftentimes because like malware developers will optimize around what they call FUD, or fully undetected. So in a lot of cases, when a new sample first comes out, it's not detected by any antivirus.
Mhm.
So, like for example, if you were, let's just say you're looking for a cracked version of Sony Vegas, I would generally bet that the one that's getting all the detections is probably the real one, and the one that has no detections is probably fake.
Okay.
Because it's an unfortunate problem.
Hmm. I never really, would have even really thought of that. Huh.
You can sort of tell because you'll get in the detections, it'll say something like hack tool
Mhm.
or game. It'll usually say what it is.
Mhm.
Whereas if it says something more or different, then that can be a red flag.
Well, yeah, if they don't name the files well and they call it payload.exe.
Oh yeah, no, that actually happened. Yeah. No, no, or
Lumastela.exe.
there was one that was like nword.exe, and someone on the Minecraft subreddit just noticed this was running when they were playing, and
Mm-hmm.
they discovered that that was a massive red flag.
Yeah, it probably would be.
Another simple tool you can use is something like detect it easy.
Mm-hmm.
That'll tell you if the file is obfuscated.
Mm-hmm.
That's not always bad news, but it can be a concern if it's like it's impossible to see what it's doing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. For anyone who's unsure, can you explain what obfuscation means in this context?
Of course. So obfuscation, and this is related to packing, is basically like there are tools that exist that can open an executable file and try and figure out what it does. So obfuscation exists to make that more difficult. That can be either by hacking it, which is essentially when the program is actually a little stub that unpacks the real program that then executes. That's one technique. Or it can just encrypt things. Like one easy technique, and on Linux and similar operating systems, you have the command strings, and you can just type strings and it'll pull out the strings in something. Well, because you can do that, some programs will encrypt the strings so that you just get gibberish.
Mm-hmm.
So that's obfuscation. Sometimes it's as simple as the old school Caesar cipher where you just rotate the letters so that it doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.